Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're re-delving into a chapter of history that is often simplified or overlooked in mainstream education. The initial encounters between Christopher Columbus and the Taino people of the Caribbean. This isn't just a story about discovery. It's a story about the profound and often tragic consequences of that first contact. So, let's peel back the layers and understand what really happened when these two worlds collided. When Columbus and his crew first arrived in the Bahamas in 1492, they didn't land on an empty shore. They encountered the Taino, a vibrant and complex society with a rich culture, a sophisticated agricultural system, and a population numbering in the hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions, across the Caribbean islands. The Taino were described by Columbus himself in his own journal as gentle, generous, and welcoming. He noted their willingness to share everything they had, writing that they are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. However, this initial perception of generosity was quickly overshadowed by another observation. Columbus saw something else in their kindness, an opportunity for exploitation. He wrote, "They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want." This single, chilling entry from his journal reveals a mindset that would define the relationship from the very beginning. The goal was not mutual exchange or understanding, it was domination. Almost immediately, Columbus began to act on this impulse. On his very first voyage, he captured several Taino individuals against their will, taking them back to Spain as living proof of his discovery. Imagine the terror of being torn from your home, your family, and everything you've ever known, forced onto a strange vessel to cross a vast ocean to an unknown world. These first captives were just the beginning. They were treated as curiosities, as specimens, foreshadowing the dehumanization that would soon become widespread policy. Upon his return on the second voyage in 1493, Columbus came not with a few small ships, but with a fleet of 17 vessels, carrying over 1,200 men, horses, and war dogs. The mission had changed. It was no longer just about exploration. It was about colonization and profit. The Spanish crown, particularly Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, had invested heavily in this venture, and they expected a return. And what was the most coveted return? Gold. The Caribbean islands, however, did not have the vast gold fields Columbus had imagined. There were small amounts of gold, mostly found in rivers, as dust and small nuggets, which the Taino used for ornamentation. But this wasn't enough to satisfy the insatiable greed of the Europeans. In response, Columbus implemented a brutal system of forced labor. He established a tribute system on the island of Hispaniola, which is modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Every Taino person over the age of 14 was required to deliver a certain quota of gold dust every 3 months. To enforce this, each Taino was given a copper token to wear around their neck as proof of their payment. If an individual was found without their token, the punishment was severe and horrific. Hands were often cut off, leaving the victim to bleed to death as a warning to others. This system was impossible for the Taino to fulfill. The amount of gold demanded simply did not exist in the quantities required. It was a system designed for failure, and that failure was met with unimaginable violence. The quest for gold led to more than just a tribute system. The Spanish forced the Taino into hard labor in makeshift mines and panned for gold in rivers for endless hours, under grueling conditions, with little food or rest. Those who resisted were met with swift and brutal force. Spanish accounts, including those from the priest Bartolomé de las Casas, who initially participated in but later condemned these atrocities, describe widespread massacres, hangings, and burnings. The Spanish soldiers, armed with steel swords, crossbows, and firearms, held a massive technological advantage over the Taino, who fought back bravely with wooden spears and clubs but were ultimately overwhelmed. Violence wasn't just a tool of enforcement, it became a part of the daily reality. Spanish colonists took Taino land, food, and women with impunity. The social structure of the Taino people, which was matrilineal and relatively egalitarian, was completely shattered. Families were torn apart as men were sent to the mines, often far from their villages, while women and children were left vulnerable to the whims of the colonists. The agricultural system that had sustained the Taino for centuries collapsed, as people were unable to tend their own crops, leading to widespread famine. This combination of forced labor, starvation, and outright violence created a cataclysmic decline in the Taino population. But there was another, silent killer that accompanied the Europeans' disease. The Taino had no immunity to Old World diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza. These illnesses swept through the islands like wildfire, wiping out entire villages in a matter of weeks. While the spread of disease was not a deliberate act of malice in the same way as the tribute system, it was a direct consequence of the European presence, and it compounded the devastation exponentially. Within just a few decades of Columbus's arrival, the Taino population had been decimated. On Hispaniola alone, the estimated population of several 100,000 in 1492 had dropped to just a few thousand by the 1530s. It was a demographic collapse of staggering proportions, one of the most severe in human history. It's crucial to understand that what Columbus initiated was not just a series of isolated acts of cruelty. He established a blueprint for colonization that would be replicated by conquistadors across the Americas for the next century. The systems of forced labor, the justification of violence in the name of crown and religion, and the dehumanization of indigenous peoples were all pioneered during these first years in the Caribbean. The encomienda system, which granted Spanish colonists control over indigenous labor and tribute, was a direct evolution of the brutal practices Columbus established. This history is difficult to confront, and for centuries, the narrative was dominated by the heroic image of Columbus as a brave explorer. But by ignoring the experiences of the Taino people, we ignore the true cost of that discovery. We erase the memory of a thriving culture and perpetuate a myth that sanitizes a brutal reality. The story of Columbus and the Taino is a powerful reminder that history is often written by the victors, and that we have a responsibility to seek out the voices of those who were silenced. The legacy of the Taino is not entirely lost. Their DNA survives in many modern Caribbean populations, a testament to their resilience. Their words have enriched our language's words, like hammock, hurricane, barbecue, and canoe, are all of Taino origin. And their story, now being told more fully, serves as a vital lesson about the dangers of greed, the consequences of dehumanization, and the importance of remembering all sides of our shared history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Until next time, take care.